Hi there, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Mark Anderson. I'm the Head of Education at NetSupport, and on our webinar today, we're going to be exploring the delicate and interesting and important topic of online safety in the Middle East. Back a month or so ago, we launched at NetSupport a lovely little guide featuring some contributors, including myself, which focuses upon online safety in the Middle East. I'm very pleased today on this webinar to welcome two of the contributors to that little brochure about online safety in the Middle East, Barry Lee Cummings and Ollie Lewis. And I'll talk more about them in just a moment. I'm really excited as well to welcome onto the webinar today Sajid Golzar, who is OBE King's Al Barsha Principal. Just really looking forward to having this lovely conversation today. So really looking forward to this conversation. Just waiting for Sajid to join us. And whilst we're waiting for things to all get lined up as we need to do, I'm just going to bring on and welcome to the webinar the one and only Mr. Barry Lee Cummings. Just to kick things off, could you share a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do, please?
Absolutely, yes. Again, thanks very much for having me on. My name is Barry Lee Cummings. I'm officially the Chief Awareness Officer for an initiative we launched here in the Middle East called Beat the Cyberbully. And what we do is we go into schools, we talk to students, we talk to parents and to teachers as well around the digital world, around some of the things that are going on, some of the things we need to be aware of, and then also how to embrace the technology and leverage it for good. It's an ongoing conversation we've had and many in this realm have around the fact that it's not the tools that are the problem, it's the hands they end up in, unfortunately, and there are ways to leverage these incredible tools for good if we can just focus the conversation around that and start to move away from some of the other things, the very attractive scenarios that our children find themselves looking at and being drawn into is, okay, if you were only able to put as much effort into some of the other things as you put into, your Call of Duty and your Snapchat and your Instagram, or is there a way that we can leverage those and get something positive out of all of that effort, as opposed to demonizing this entire digital world? And so our approach is interactive workshops to try and just raise the awareness around that, pose some questions, and ultimately also provide some strategies, tools, and things to students, mums and dads, and teachers alike, so that we can start to approach this as a society, as a community, as opposed to what we see going on, which is a little bit of finger pointing of, why aren't you doing more to protect my children? Why am I not doing more to protect my own children? And all of these kind of scenarios that are unfolding, we're trying to actually bring this into a safe discussion, much like today, which is why I'm very, very honored to be a part of this and happy to do so, because the more we talk about these things, the more that we can actually do something about it.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that as well. And we first met, crikey, certainly pre-pandemic, working at the Jess School in Dubai, and I was struck by not only the sort of commonality, but the great advice and initiatives that you're engaging in across the region, working with families and schools and children, most importantly, in thinking around these sorts of things. So thank you so much for joining us today, Barry. Very pleased to have you with us. Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to welcome my second guest onto the webinar this afternoon. This is someone who I've worked with many times over the years, particularly on our Guest Award-winning live stream show called Learn Live UAE. I won't introduce him other than by just saying right now his name, and I'm sure he'll tell you more about himself as I bring onto the webinar the one and only Mr. Ollie Lewis. Welcome to the webinar, Ollie.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? It's really pleasant
Yeah.
to be here. Thanks for inviting me once again. It's nice to get that kind of shout out about Learn Live UAE. That feels like many, many moons ago. With guests being last week in Dubai, it brought back many fond memories of our initiative to kind of spread the word around, whether it's pedagogy, technology, online safety in schools back in that kind of post-pandemic era.
Brilliant. Tell us
I
a
was
little bit
just
about
going to
yourself and
say,
what in your work, please, Ollie.
yeah, of course. So I'm deputy head academic at Amity International School in Abu Dhabi. It's one of the schools in the Amity Education Group. We're about 20 schools across the globe. The school here in Abu Dhabi is an all-through British curriculum school. So we have FS1 all the way through to year 13. We've got the whole spectrum, which provides us with many awesome opportunities, having all of the children under one roof. And we are I think we're the only school in the region to have a beach and a boathouse. So there's a USP in there somewhere. I've been really lucky to work with you on many occasions, Mark, in the digital realm, in the education realm, and I'm really looking forward to our conversations today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ollie. And he's always one for hiding his light under a bushel. So Ollie himself is a 2-time Guess Award winner. He's worked at other schools across the Middle East and other places around the world too. He's currently authoring a book called The EdTech Playbook with someone who might be talking right now. He's also someone who's got a lot of experience. And so, for example, mentioning guests from last week, Ollie was chairing panels, of which our next guest was a panelist in that conversation. And he's no stranger to sharing both online and on the stage and in delivering professional learning. And if you want someone who's pretty handy at creating a timetable too, he's not too bad at organising things inside your school, given his deputy head academic role at Amity over in Abu Dhabi. So welcome and thank you for joining us, Ollie. Your insights will be really well received, I am sure. Thank you so much, Ollie. So my next guest on the webinar is someone I've known for a long time as well. He's someone I met first in IRL, as the children say. See, Barry, I'm getting down with the vernacular straight away. Someone I met in real life just earlier this year. For the first time face to face. He is someone who's had a massive impact wherever it is that he's worked, and so much so he was recognised with an OBE. I won't spend too much time doing his whole intro, otherwise we might be here right through the full length of the hour, but it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Sajid Gulzar to the webinar to share his insights in his role as the principal at King's Al Barsha in Dubai. Welcome, Sajid.
Good evening, colleagues. I'm not quite sure what's happening to me on the screen. It looks like you're doing one of your effects again, Mark. The last time you put me up on screen, I was wearing a gold jacket and dancing, I think, when you were demonstrating the dangers of AI. It looks like something similar is happening again. I'm Sajid Gulzar. Lovely to be here this evening with colleagues. Barry, I've not met before, so lovely to meet you, Barry. Ollie had me on stage last week at Guess, and Mark and I shared a stage not that long ago, although it seems a very long time ago, I think it was in Heathrow, near Heathrow, wasn't it? Something like that, yeah.
It was, yes. Yeah.
So I've been out in Dubai for just under 3 months as principal of King's Al Barsha. It's a British international school, one of a group of 3 out here, and I came from the wonderful city of Birmingham, home of the glorious Aston Villa, although not too glorious last night against Nottingham Forest. I had ruined my weekend. I was the CEO of a multi-academy trust in Birmingham, of a mixed mat of primary and secondary schools. I've worked in Birmingham all of my professional life before coming out to Dubai, predominantly challenging inner city, what I like to call underserved communities, transforming failing schools. That's been my life for the last 25 years. A bit of a change now, both to the weather and to the educational landscape. But I think a lot of the challenges are very, very similar. And chief amongst them is how do we keep ourselves and young people safe online with this wonderful digital miracle that we're all experiencing, with all its wonders and opportunities. But equally, there are some challenges and some dangers that we need to manage.
No, you're absolutely right, Sajid, and thank you for your introduction there, and thank you again for joining us on this webinar around online safety in the Middle East today, Sajid. I wanted to start off by asking you, you're quite new to the region, but you were talking there about parallels between between what you've experienced here in the UK where I'm based, and what you're seeing in the Middle East as well. Could you share some of the sort of challenges and opportunities you've encountered in relation to online safety within the educational framework of the Middle East, please?
Well, if I talk about safety in general, colleagues who've been out here will know that society here is very, very safe. In terms of personal physical safety, it's I think Dubai was voted safest city in the world, and equally the Emirates generally are very, very safe. So I think there's a degree of innocence in terms of the students and the young people that we are responsible for educating, but equally the online space is as challenging and potentially dangerous as it is anywhere in the world. There's a proliferation of devices, of access in school, outside of school. Social media is huge, and often we find the problems that we're encountering are to do with social media and students entering unsafe spaces, be that with each other or not. There's what we can control inside the building. There's what we can control re devices when we're at school. But equally, there's a feeling of a lack of control sometimes, and we have to rely on and educate both the youngsters and parents. So there are some quite broad parallels in that respect in terms of how do we ensure that we're educating both our students and their families about how to stay safe online, and how do we ensure that happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Are there any initiatives that you've embarked upon yet in your time at King's Barsha? Because when it comes to anything, so as you know, that triangulation of support between home, school, and child is super, super important. How do you engage with your parent community around these important topics, Sajid?
I think that's where there is a significant parallel. It's about being open. It's about having effective communication. It's about being on the front foot and sharing information in a timely manner. It's about inviting parents in to have these discussions. It's about ensuring that we're constantly speaking to the youngsters about how to stay safe online, and it's about dealing with issues as they arise. So there aren't any specific initiatives that I've implemented or initiated simply because what's already happening is effective. So it's a case of making sure that all of those good things that are happening continue. It's about having a really high level of awareness amongst both the student body and the parents, the community, about the dangers that can be posed and the potential dangers that are out there, and how to mitigate against that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It was great to see that the things are really well embedded within the school already, Sajid. Thank you for sharing there. Ollie, I wanted to bring you into the conversation. You've been recognised for your innovative approaches to teaching and learning. How do you see the role of digital literacy in fostering online safety among students and educators within the region? Ollie?
Thank you, Mark. That's quite a big question, but I will do my best to try and unpick it. And I think Sajid has kind of segued me into this perfectly, and it resonates with a topic that we were talking about last week, and that's about purpose. What's your purpose as an educational organisation? And it should be just about being a learning organisation, warts and all the nice stuff that you have to acknowledge through your curriculum, but all of the other things that children are exposed to, and actually being on the front foot as an organisation and making sure that you're dealing with what is real in the lives of our students, and whether we like it or not, the new normal is digital. And as educators and schools, we all have that kind of moral duty to be flag bearers for developing, specific to your question, Mark, digital literacy. I've heard you many a times share, and it really resonates, and it's applicable to this as well, that literacy isn't just an English teacher's responsibility. Numeracy isn't just a maths teacher's responsibility, and neither is digital literacy. It's everybody's. It has to be a unified front in schools, so that we can work towards developing digital literacy in our students. And it doesn't take too much work to actually look at your curriculum as a whole and identify areas where you could start to develop some of those digital literacy skills to not just enhance but support your curriculum as well. So I think it's of pivotal importance, and just as Sajid said, especially in this part of the world where the MENA region is seeing as pushing the boundaries with technology, and being at the forefront of that digital innovation. I think it's probably more important now than ever that we continue to push that envelope around developing digital literacy in our students. And that all starts, going back to that idea of purpose in education, it starts with us as adults. And being able to accept the fact, I don't know about this, but I'm going to reach out to somebody that does. Barry, could you just come and educate us about this? Or Mark, I'm experiencing this. What would you do in this scenario? And leaning on your professional network, because if we don't start with the acknowledgement of us as the self, as the adult in the room, and build our knowledge in digital literacy, we can't then impart that on the students. But the flip side to that as well is, all of our schools have hundreds of awesome, young, keen students that want to learn more and that will share and act as flag bearers as well within our schools and share what their experience is like, and then use those. If you haven't got a student digital leadership program, create one and have them teach you, the adult, about digital literacy and kind of their experience, and go on that journey together as a school.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much, Ollie. You know that I'm a big advocate for student digital leadership. It can make such a big difference. Thank you. I wanted to dive deeper, Ollie, because you know me, when I host these sorts of things, I love for there to be a few practical takeaways. So you said it's not too difficult to look at your curriculum and find some opportunities to see the ways in which digital literacy and citizenship can sort of interweave into that. So have you got, with your sort of deputy head academic hat on, have you got any sort of examples that you put into place at your school that maybe might be of interest to our viewers today?
So we're, just for context, I've been at Amity for about 3 months now. We're undergoing a curriculum review at the moment. With my science teacher hat on, fake news has been a thing in science for years. And now with the advancements of AI and deep fakes and me being able to, record my voice and then create an AI generated version of myself, a synthetic Ollie Lewis, I could quite easily create a scenario in a science classroom and create some data and results to try and, challenge some contemporary thought or theory in a particular area. And I can then start to unpick some of those just digital skills with the students, and then some of those factual skills around actually the content knowledge that I'm trying to impart on them. So I think, that's something I'm quite keen at looking, and I know that other schools have started that journey as well, around fostering that. But that's my kind of science teacher hat on there, to give you a quick example.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Ollie. We refer back to the conversations we had earlier this year, where I was a bit naughty with Sajid and doing a few things to him. But these tools are so readily available now. I'm sure we'll jump onto this but thinking about in Snapchat, you've got the AI chatbot built directly into Snapchat now. What does that say about conversations that young people might be wanting to have or having? There's so much in there now. Thank you so much for that there, Ollie. And talking about Barry, it's about time you had a chance to say something, Barry. So as the co-founder of Beat the Cyberbully, could you share some impactful strategies or interventions you found to be effective in combating cyberbullying and promoting a safe online environment? And maybe given the way the sort of conversation sort of moved then towards talking about AI and deep fakes and those sort of things, and maybe sort of interweave some of that sort of response into your answer as well, because people do need to be aware of these things and to be mindful of what is real and what is not, and all these different things. I'm sure you've got plenty of advice around that, Barry.
Yes. How much time have we got? No, this is in all seriousness, it's such a vast topic that actually trying to bring it down to what are we talking about is quite difficult. But I think in terms of what we've seen working here in schools, from our perspective, implementing an opportunity for us to speak with the school has been very beneficial for the schools that we've been with, because we are able to talk to students and perhaps more importantly parents slightly differently than the school can, especially here in the Middle East, where to Ollie's point earlier, an educational establishment is an educational establishment as well as a business. And so there are two hats that have to be worn here in the UAE. And sometimes it's about saying, what are we doing here when it comes to what's going on? And there tends to be, and I've said this to the parents that I've spoken to, and as a parent myself of children here, that sometimes there is a sense of entitlement that what I'm paying to send my child to school here means that I call the shots. And it's your responsibility as the school to raise my children and to protect my children. And I've kind of outsourced that responsibility a little bit. And what we've seen work very well is to have a conversation that is actually, and something that Beat the Cyberbully has done over the last couple of years, even through the pandemic, is focus on mum and dad as the missing piece of the jigsaw, if you like, because we have a lack of knowledge in this space. We don't have, in many cases, real life experience of being 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old and having all of this at our fingertips. We have an idea, but it's formed with the bias of our adult brain going, well, why would anyone want to spend this much time, and what a waste of time, and this is silly, and I don't understand it. And we come up with all of these kind of excuses, really, to not upgrade ourselves. And that's where we've seen some really big successes in some of the schools we've worked at, who have then taken it to another level. And it's something that we talk about to mums and dads at home. It's about providing this safe space for your children to talk to you at home, because we're all super busy, and usually the time allocated to talking to our children is at pickup. They're in the back of the car, they can't go anywhere. And we ask that question, how was school? And we get the inevitable grunt or fine. And we think, okay, fine, right, onto gymnastics across the street, wherever we've got to get them to. And then we feel that, not that it's a tick box exercise, but okay, we've asked them, we've given them a chance to talk to us. There's a million other things that need doing, so off we go. But also in schools, if we as parents can allocate time to actually giving our child, first of all, enough time to process what's happened at school today, that sometimes hasn't happened on the drive home, and then give them another opportunity to talk with us about what's going on, and for us to be able to initiate that conversation knowledgeably. And in schools, we've seen this, where some of the schools we've worked with have then done this at school and provided an opportunity for parents and children to talk to each other around the subject of online bullying, online misuse, to really get to the bottom of what is bothering the children and how mum and dad can help. Because a lot of what we've seen, and this is where I think tools like Classroom Cloud are so important, is it gives you the actual vibe of what's going on. Not what I think the problem is and what I, as Beat the Cyberbully, need to come in and talk to them about, or not even what the school has told me that I need to come in and talk to them about because it's what they think is the issue, it's what's trending in social media at the moment. It's getting that insight out from the students that's saying, you don't need to worry about us doing X, Y, and Z. What I really have a problem with, or I really want to talk to somebody about, is why. This is the subject. And then as you extrapolate that throughout the school, you go, oh, wow, that isn't just a year 4 thing. Hang on, there's an issue here that we need to address, and it's not what we thought. And so this is where we've seen really effective impact, if you like, is in a very long-winded way. I've said we need to listen and listen to what's actually coming out from the people that we're trying to protect at the end of the day.
No, that's such an important thing, listening. And the other thing I think you've highlighted really well there as well, Barry, is the importance of making sure you facilitate the opportunity for the time to talk about these things, because we're so busy as working professionals, whether we're talking about teachers or whether we're talking about parents in their lives as well, and bringing people together to better have those sort of conversations is so important. I mean, it was lovely as well to hear you mention one of our products, Classroom.cloud. He's not on commission, I promise you. But one of our products has the ability to track the keywords, the things that children are typing into their devices. And so I believe what you were trying to say there, Barry, is because you can see that you can take the temperature and the pulse of the sort of conversations of things that are causing issues for young people through the back end of the platform as a safeguarding or a sort of online safety professional. And so it gives you that insight, that contextual knowledge of what children are concerned about, what they're worried about, what they're searching for, all these sorts of things. So thank you so much for mentioning that in what you shared there, Barrett. It's really, really lovely of you. Thank you. I wanted to bring Sajid and Ollie into this thing around parents. I mean, you touched upon it a little bit in what you shared before, Sajid. Thank you. Ollie, you've mentioned it as well. Barry, you've gone into more depth there as well. Parental involvement is clearly key in enhancing online safety within school communities. Have you got any more insights about how you sort of address those things within your schools? Ollie, have you got any sort of events that you put on, such as the things that Barry has mentioned there? Sajid, you've talked about it being sort of contextual within the existing frameworks that you've got with parents.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in. I think Barry's touched on a really key point there around cultural sensitivity and just sort of being mindful. I'd just like to kind of carry that on with the idea that offer more than you think you actually need to offer. You know, you can almost never do enough, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start doing something. And however you can, try and involve the students as well, just to go back to a kind of former point. The more opportunities that you can actually raise for parents, whether that be through drop-in sessions, recorded sessions, information events, trickling information through newsletters, just sharing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and having that kind of open forum for discussion with parents. And at the right moment, given the context of whatever it is you're talking about, have the students present as well to the parents. So it's not just always, they're not just always hearing it from the teacher. And probably one of the biggest challenges that we will all likely face is, given the kind of cultural context of the region, quite often when there is an issue, the parent won't want to front up to that issue to the school for kind of cultural reasons. So having a tool like Barry said, classroom.cloud, that gives you all of the information at your fingertips is hugely beneficial to you as a school.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Ollie. So one of the things that I found most impactful was the things when I've been enrolled myself as well, has been actually surveying the students and getting their voice. And then actually, when you bring the parents in and you share what children, how much time they're spending playing games, how much time they're spending using devices, all these different things, and parents are often shocked, you know, as to what is actually happening. And there are tools available parents can use, aren't there? Things like screen time apps. If you look at you can see your children's usage, all these sorts of things. So there's lots and lots of stuff you can do and share with parents about their sort of usage and all those sorts of things as well. I wanted to jump across to you for a second, Barry, with your expertise in online safety. What do you see as being the sort of big trends in the Middle East, and then the potential impacts on school environments? What are you seeing being sort of at the forefront of issues at the moment, Barry?
Yeah, I think that it will be no surprise that the answer to that question is related to AI and the implementation of AI in various tools, not just the social channels and you know, it was alluded to earlier about the AI that's been built into Snapchat and what that says about where we are as you know, a society, that there's a preference in some cases for young people to talk to that AI rather than someone else. To a human, to a parent, to a teacher, and so there's also in a few of the schools that we've been into that we get the sort of preface as to why we're coming in, and it's I would say 9 times out of 10 it is something to do with can you touch upon the idea of artificial intelligence and what is it and where is it to be used and how can it be used, and not just from a negative perspective. And this is something that we always try to focus on, to say yes, we as caregivers, teachers, educators, parents need to know about the pitfalls so that we can mitigate for that. But then realistically, we want to flip that and make the narrative about the positive, that these tools are advancing forwards at such a rate that, kind of like when I got into digital nearly, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, where companies were pushing back again, oh, you know, it's a passing phase, it's a fad, nobody's going to want to see my business on social media, nobody's going to want to interact with my business through a chat bot. And yet here we are a few more years down the line, and what are we all doing? It was a it was showing us what was going to happen, and this is what's happening. And so we're also at this point where we have to look at how to embrace it. And it comes back to something that I said before, is that with a lot of mums and dads, we feel a bit powerless, because in some cases we may have just got up to speed with what's happening on social platforms, and now we're familiar with what those social platforms are, and at least we're not making that face when our child says to us something happened on Snapchat, like, well, what's Snapchat, what are you talking about? We understand it exists, we understand there are issues with it, but we're still at the point that if it goes any further than the name of it, we go, oh, okay, now I'm a little bit lost. And what we've seen is that we've been in this for so long that a lot of parents are in that situation. The way I always relate it is that when you've met somebody a couple of times but you can't remember their name, or you've been talking to somebody for a certain period of time and you can't remember their name, you think, I can't ask them, that's so rude. If I ask them what their name is, that is exceptionally rude. And we've got parents at the point of saying, I can't ask that question about the digital space because that just seems like such a basic question. I should know the answer to that. And actually, it's saying that's if you don't know the answer to the question, please ask the question. And what we're seeing is that the rate of advancement of the digital space is so quick that anybody from a parental caregiving perspective who was kind of pushed back against this happening is going backwards at such a rate of knots. They feel incapable, a little bit lost of being helpful to their children, and that they then start to put their own self-limiting beliefs in place that, well, I'm so far behind, there's just no point, I might as well just let it go. And you think, oh, please, let's not get to that point. But it's the speed at which we're seeing these things happening that I think is causing a lot of the issues within schools. And even, we have a big focus on parents, but even within the student body, where you've got those, all of them are digital natives, but then you've got the grades of how fast they adapt to these things, just as you do with playing football or doing gymnastics. You've got the guys and girls that get it and go nuts straight away, and then there's a few more that take a bit of time, and then there's some people that just have no interest. And how do we make sure that we're addressing all of these? Because it's something that we've been saying for the last decade, is that if we look at today, and if we don't have some sort of digital tattoo as we relate to it, then that also poses a question as to why. These tools are here, and there's so much positive that could be had from them. It's coming across to us that there's a huge fear associated with some young people as well, saying, actually, I'm just going to abstain completely because I'm scared of what's going to happen. Or if I do go out somewhere, is somebody going to catch me doing something, upload it to YouTube, and then I'm going to be, tagged from that perspective. And that's having an impact on our society as well. And for young people's experience of being young people. And so what we're trying to see, if we can do over the next sort of 12 months, is to really double down on this messaging of accepting what's going on and leveraging the positive out of it. Still obviously being aware of the negatives, but really focusing on it's happening. We can't really push back against this anymore. We're way, way past that point. How do we embrace this? How do we get the safest use out of this technology that is here, that is going to change the world that we live in? How do we get on that wave and ride it for our mutual advantage as a school, community, and society as a whole?
That's a great response, Barry, and lots to sort of go away and think about and unpick from that. It's certainly a massive, massive topic, as we've all alluded to. Thank you for that, Barry. One of the things that I liked most about your response there was the revisiting the idea that it's okay to not know the answer, even though you might not remember that person's name, as you sort of shared in the example. One of the issues I find around, and all of us use social media. I've tagged all three of you in plenty of enough different things on social media platforms for you to know that I'm a big fan myself. But you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I wanted to sort of dive into a question around misconceptions, because again, often, we might have our understanding of what things are, but again, with technology moving so quickly as well, it's hard to keep abreast of the changes of things happen so quickly. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask all three of you, and maybe I've not heard from you in a little while, Sajid, maybe I'll come to you first. But I wanted to ask you all, sort of drawing from your varied experiences, what sort of common misconceptions about online safety and education have you come across in the Middle East? And have you got any sort of thoughts about how those sort of misconceptions can be addressed?
I was lucky enough pre-pandemic to go out to Apple headquarters in Cupertino, and I heard this gentleman called Professor John Landis speak, and it completely flipped my thinking and my view of technology. My view was that this is growing too quickly. We're not able to keep our kids safe. There is good, but actually the bad far outweighs it. And he completely opened my mind when he compared it to what he called light bulb level technology. So he talked about the invention of the light bulb and how innovative and strange and different that was when it happened. But actually, for our generation, I'm talking about myself here. I'm not going to guess at anybody's age, but I was born in 1974, and he was probably about 4 or 5 years older than me. And he talked about when he was born, when he was growing up, the light switch just was. We didn't think about how it came about, how you press the switch and the light comes on. We didn't think about what lies behind that mechanism of pressing the button, the light coming on, how electricity works. It just was. But that generation that went from no light bulb to light bulb, it really was something that exercised their thinking, something they thought about. Was it a force for good? Was it a force for bad? I remember hearing a story that in some parts of the world, when radio was first invented, people were fearful because they thought it was spirits inside a box that were speaking, and there was real fear around that, and we don't think about it. And then he gave the example of youngsters in school now, and the technology that just is, like the light bulb or the television was for us. It just is. It's not something they think about. It's just something they're born into, and something they intuitively engage with because it just is. So I think that, to go back to Barry's point, a lot of the misconceptions lie with the fact that we're often behind the curve, and because we live in a society where the negative is always much more publicized than the positive, we often forget the positive, the practical. We live in a world where my 17-year-old can book a taxi on an app, can go to the mall, can buy his food and drink using his phone, and if he runs out of money, he'll text me and I'll send him money, and all of this is done digitally. And we don't often think about that. So I think the misconceptions, and it's not necessarily in the UAE or in the UK, I think there's a lot of work to be done around rebalancing perceptions of technology for old duffers like me. I was going to say us, but I'll say me, and particularly those of us who are not in education, and again maybe working in industries that are behind the curve. So those people who are, and actually it's difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of technology proliferates in a lot of industries at different levels, but it can be really quite specific. So I think the education piece is really more about those of our generation, than those people who've kind of born into it. But equally, what we saw during the pandemic was the power of human connection. That was lost. The technology got us through, but actually what we realized more than anything was we missed the power of human connection. And that was, you could have spent a year meeting people online, and you meet them once in person, and that relationship is much more significant after 5 minutes in the same room, as compared to a year online. So we really began to appreciate that as important as technology is, and as much as it got us through, actually human connection. That's perhaps another misconception, that we can do all of this virtually, that we can do all of this online, that we can do it without meeting people. So I think what the pandemic taught us was both the importance of technology in getting us through life when it is as challenging as it was during the pandemic to get things done, but equally it also taught us about the power of human connection and the importance of people being in the same space at the same time. So I think there's misconceptions around that sort of thing that still need ironing out. And certainly in schools, there are people like me who are parents. The me pre-visit to and hearing Professor Landis about this is really bad. This is an opportunity for all of the bad things in the world to exist in the palm of a 10-year-old. And how can we? And wouldn't it be better if we didn't have it? And I think to Barry's point, it's here. How do we now engage with it and get the best out of it and take the fear away, but to have a healthy understanding of the challenges that it brings also.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great response there, Sajid. And just to assuage any concerns you might have, I've got a big birthday next year as well. Having been born in '74 too, Sajid, so don't feel too bad about it. I think we probably got a few years on Barry and Ollie.
Only a couple.
But your points, Sajid, link quite nicely actually into the next question. So unless Barry and Ollie had a really pressing point to make on that, I want to sort of move on to the next question, because it is about, and I'm a big believer in a good decision is an informed decision, and by addressing these misconceptions and making it really clear what the positives are, and where some of the problems might lie, and all those sorts of things, as you were talking about, Sajid. By making those sort of things really, really clear, then we know where we're at. So I wanted to talk a little bit about policy and regulation. So with that in mind, considering the diverse sort of nature of the population and the cultural differences and the regulatory landscape within the Middle East, how do you think schools can tailor? And because we want things which are tight but loose, right? So we want them tight so we make sure everyone uses these things well and safe and in informed ways and all these different things. But we want to loosen them so they can still go in there and use them as well, right? So how can we go about effectively sort of tailoring online safety policies to be inclusive and effective whilst still maintaining sort of regulation to make sure the young people are sort of kept safe? Have you got any thoughts on that, perhaps, Ollie or Barry?
I think Barry's probably the best one to chip in initially on this.
I was going to say the exact opposite, Ollie, but no, I will. I think that when it comes down to it, and this is, I suppose, from an external perspective, what we do as Beat the Cyberbully, is that there has to be a flexible approach to this, whatever gets implemented. So the first thing is that we have to implement something, but it's also to understand that that is not the final be all and end all. What I've seen happening is that sometimes there's such a there's so many cooks in the kitchen trying to contribute into the creation of the policy that nothing happens. And so even in this 2023, that I go to certain schools and I ask about certain areas of their policy and say, we haven't quite always, it's under process is what's the response, and it's being done. And I think, okay, and I come back a few months later or a year later, and it's still in progress, and nothing has been put into place. And so I think when we're looking at this, we need to look at the data is perhaps the most important thing. What's actually happening in our school? And if you can't get that data, then the first step is to get that data. And that can be surveys, it can be using tools, but to have a finger on the pulse of what's going on, and then implement version 1 of the policy and have it out there, but know that it can be amended to version 1.1 and 1.2 and 2.0, and that it can grow as you grow as a school. Because I think that sometimes the organization feels, well, we've got to get this right. This is such an important subject, which it is. But I don't think there is a right out of the box. There is a let's do what we think is best for what we can see is happening in our school, put that into play, and then measure the data back again and say, okay, what's going on? And again, it's not to be flippant about it, because there can be some really devastating scenarios unfolding. And if you don't have something in place, then there's a big problem for everybody involved in that. But it's a case of trying to make the best approach is to have something in place that seems to meet the need of what's going on in the school right now, and let it iterate. And that's where we've seen some of the schools really working and actually getting unstuck, because I've gone into a couple, even with like my consultants head on, and said, well, what have you got? Right, well, let's start with that then. And let's at least have that in place, because then you can work on those other ends. But this is something that can work for a certain subject area. And in doing that, it's almost that writer's block, if you like. They get over that and go, oh, okay, it's all right for it not to be, air quotes, perfect, but it's there. It's based around what we see going on in our organization, and now we can build on it. And I think that that's definitely, a starting point.
Great stuff. Thank you, Barry. Ollie, did you want to follow up with some points?
I think Barry's kind of nailed it on the head there, that it is an ongoing process and a working document, and it's not set in stone. And your choices will iterate as you learn more, not just about the usage, but about behaviours, attitudes, and what's actually going on, both for the user, but also for the teachers as well, across your organisation. And I think that's a cultural shift that we all need to really perpetuate across all of our schools, because quite often we can be quite laser focused on a strategy and just work towards that strategy without being adaptive and responsive like we would expect a teacher to be in their classroom. If a child doesn't get something, you respond to that in the moment. And I think the same applies in this instance. I think Barry's absolutely nailed that answer.
Brilliant stuff, Ollie. Well, listen, I'm going to sort of keep the spotlight on you for a moment, if that's okay, Ollie, because as I said, you're known for your innovative practices but that innovation to be also calm and measured and tempered by things like research and evidence of what works, and not always with technology, but what works when it comes to sort of thinking around teaching and learning and all these sort of things. So I wanted to sort of do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, if we could, Ollie. How do you envisage the evolution of online safety measures in forthcoming years, especially in the light of increasing integration of educational technology in the classroom? So, with platforms developing, with more AI sitting behind the scenes, with more guide on the side opportunities for teachers rather than being the sage on the stage. Where do you see the online safety sort of measures to support all these new technologies sort of coming from, and what do you see happening?
To be totally honest, I don't think a lot will happen in the next year or two, primarily just because, like Barry and everybody actually has alluded to on this, the rate of pace of change with technology is so vast at the moment that it's almost impossible to keep up. And while we try and always act on the front foot, and develop systems and policies to actually support our students, I don't actually see at scale much changing. And that might be a little bit doom and gloomy, but I think we need to try and kind of catch up with the curve, which almost feels unobtainable if you look at how many new tools and products are being released almost on a daily basis at the moment within that educational space. So I think schools that already have a handle on it will continue to have a handle on it. And I think the schools that don't necessarily have a handle on it need to talk to those schools that do, and actually seek advice from peers and colleagues, because that's what we are. We might work in different institutions, and actually, whilst we might be in competition with each other for the betterment of education and students, I think we need to have that kind of open door policy like we're all advocating for having in our schools and with parents. But I'm not convinced we'll see much for the next year, but then I think suddenly it will kind of hit the headlines and be a real huge focus, not just in the media, in the MENA region, but kind of across the globe. And that's, truth be told, that's what I think might happen.
Well, as expected, Ollie, you are as calm and as measured as I always find you to be. So but I don't think that's a bad thing. Certainly, being as old and withered and what have you as Sajid is, I can say that we're all parents here. Okay, and something I'm sure we've all heard our children say before is, "Are we nearly there yet?" And I think we've actually quite rightly been asking that question of technology for quite some time. But the truth of the matter is that the technology does move forward really, 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 really quickly. Often it's us that takes the time to actually catch up, to understand where things are at. And we talked about misconceptions and problems and people not knowing, and then feeling bad that they can't ask the questions because, as Barry was saying earlier, we've asked those questions before and we've forgotten them, and all the rest of it. So we will be have to play catch up because technology isn't going to stop moving super quick. But I think it goes to what you were saying, Ollie, and as others have said throughout the course of the conversation on the webinar today. It's about keeping those values, the human side of things there, and like you were saying, I think your quote earlier, Ollie, which may have been a bit echo chambery, given I might have said it myself before, but it was about, we're all teachers of literacy, we're all teachers of numeracy, we're all teachers of digital literacy. And I think the same is true around digital citizenship as well. And viewers, if you do want to see good role modelling of good digital citizenship, then please do follow the accounts of all three of our guests today. You can find Ollie on Twitter, or X as it's now known, formerly Twitter, as @Lewis_coaching. You can follow Sajid at Sajid_Golzai. You can follow Barry at Cyber Safety UAE. But the reason why I mention that isn't to promote their social media accounts, although it might seem like it, but actually you'll see them, really not just talking the talk, but walking the walk around all these things too. So we're getting close towards the end of this webinar this afternoon, exploring online safety in the Middle East. Thank you for joining us. I've got one final question, which I'm going to bring to all three of our panelists, and I'll bring you all onto this sort of screen together in a second to ask this in the round. So what I'd like you to do, please, each of you, is share one key takeaway or action point for the educators and leaders that are present here on the webinar today about how they can go about enhancing online safety in their respective institutions. So if you've got one sort of takeaway for people today, what would that be? So let me just bring Barry up onto the main screen here for a second. I'll just do the same with Sajid as well. And working on the basis that all of you are looking at things exactly as I am. So Ollie's top left, then me, then Barry bottom left, then Sajid. Let's start in the bottom right and work anti-clockwise from there, please. So Sajid, what would your one sort of key takeaway be for people to sort of think about implementing in their own institutions? What would that be, Sajid?
I think for me, it would be aware of the platforms that the youngsters are using. What's the in thing, what's going on, and back in the day, it'd be about what's everyone watching, what music is everyone listening to, what are the things that are bringing young people together. And now we've got a proliferation of apps and platforms that are being used for a variety of different things by young people. So what are those things that they're choosing to spend their time on, that they're engaging with each other on, that they're using, what predominates? So it used to be what's the toy in the playground, back in the day. What is it? Is it Pokemon cards? Whatever it is, and in the online space now, we have trends and we have things that are in at the moment. So it's just being aware, just keeping an ear to the ground. If you've got your own kids, that makes it a little bit easier, but just being aware of what's going on and what platforms they're using.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Sajid. And I would agree, because if you don't know what spaces your children are at, then how can you provide any opportunities to sort of support them? If children are crossing the road in new ways, if children, you can't provide those ring fences and safeguards if you don't know where and how young people are interacting and engaging. Great advice. Thank you, Sajid. Barry, what are your thoughts?
So I think I would say on this, the thing to take away is the idea of flipping the narrative. It's time for us to focus on the positive use of the technology in our world. It's here. It's going to keep moving at the speed of sound. The longer that we keep pushing back, again, harping back to the introduction of digital marketing, so many of the big brands that disappeared because they thought this isn't going to last. It's here, it's happening. Our children are on it. To reference, what was said before, Generation Alpha, which are the latest generation for 2010 onwards, they're the generation that get it. We don't, not that we don't have to worry about them, but they understand the technology and will bend it to their will. it's the Generation Zs and the millennials that are the transitionary age groups that are having the problems with it. And so what we need to do is help them as much as possible focus on the positive, how they can take this, how we as mum and dad can also upgrade our own knowledge to be able to talk knowledgeably about this with them, open the communication channels. That's the other key point to this. Start the conversations. If you're already having the conversations, figure out ways to take them to the next level. If you're not having those conversations, start them.
Great advice. Thank you very much indeed, Barry. Final words then, Mr. Ollie Lewis. What would your sort of key sort of takeaway be for people to sort of try and think about implementing into their institution? Ollie?
I think in the age of technology and the advancement of AI, your greatest asset is to focus on the human. And whilst the technology is there and quite often is the medium or the vehicle for various aspects, just like Barry, Sajid, yourself have all said, it's bring the humans and invite the humans in. Try and dissociate the technology initially from that human aspect, and then bring it back in with a kind of technological focus, whether that's with your staff, with your students, with the parent body, and kind of really drill down and focus on what it is to be a positive human and a positive contributor and a discerning user of technology through whatever channels you can in your school, and really just concentrate on that human aspect, because that's the thing that unites us the most, is we are all one. We might come from different places and spaces, but actually we're all made of the same stuff. And as you quite often say, there's more that unites us than divides us, and we're all educationalists at heart. We're all part of learning organisations, so let's just concentrate on what it is to be human.
And what a lovely way to wrap things up there. Thank you very much. I think a key word actually there around use of technology, and this is across the piece actually, not just about online safety, but for teaching and technology for teaching and learning as well, Ollie. It's about that discerning use, isn't it? Something I know Barry's talked an awful lot about over the years is the idea of the digital, put my teeth in, the digital tattoo. You know, the actions of things, the words we say, the things we share, that they are viewed by everyone, and whether it's a new job you're going for, or whether it's someone doing some background on you, or whatever it is, you know, the things you share and how you use them will be a footprint in the sand for many moons to come. Listen, thank you so much to Sajid for joining us. I do appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you too to Barry for yours as well, and to you, Ollie. If you're looking for more around this topic, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, please do head over to netsupportsoftware.com, where you can find our quite hefty online safety guide for the Middle East. There's a whole load of really useful information and takeaways inside there. With contributions from Ollie and Barry and the CEO of NetSupport, Mr. Al Kingsley, and you might just find a few words in there from myself too. Thank you again for joining us on this webinar. We've got more lined up. You can join us for forthcoming webinars focusing on things like cybersecurity, data privacy and security, well-being within your school, the ever-present topic of AI. We'll be diving more into that as well as we progress through this academic year. But for now, thank you again to our three guests. Thank you to you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you join us for our next webinar here from NetSupport.